Have you ever had one thing you were doing remind you to do something else that you were also planning to do? Did you see my recent rail fanning video about a work train in Seattle's Inner Bay Yard? Well, after I produced that video a couple of days ago, it suddenly occurred to me that we had run a somewhat similar work train over here on my HO layout after cleaning up from the long series of operating sessions that we had. All of that being in the past and covered by previous videos that I've produced. So today, I thought I would go back and show you some shots from a couple of cleanup sessions that we had after the operating sessions that are full of some kind of neat train shots. And there's no particular structure to this, it's just what happens when you're cleaning up from an operating session. You have to run trains around. But they're all pretty cool trains, so I hope you'll enjoy it. This first train we're looking at is the eastbound version of the Pacific Zip, which was the Burlington Northern's first foray into high-speed dedicated intermodal train service. It's heading underneath the Dravis Street overpass and northbound in Inner Bay. Well, actually eastbound. But the point is that the Pacific Zip was the westbound train. Pacific Zip was number 3, and this eastbound train was number 4, and that's what we're watching now. Someday I'll bore you with a video about the makeup of both of these trains, but it'll take me a while to get to it. Meanwhile, in what I'm describing as a cleanup session, Robin Peel was messing around in the narrow gauge yard there, while our train number 4 comes through the Delta yard area underneath his armpit. Robin's been coming over here to help work on the layout lately because all of us in the Seattle area are getting ready for the National Narrow Gauge Convention, which is going to occur over Labor Day weekend in Tacoma, Washington. And layouts like this one here will be having open houses during that convention. I'm mainly a standard gauge modeler, but of course I have this narrow gauge branch, and so people will enjoy seeing it. I'll leave the link to the conference website in the description field. You'll also notice the dual gauge curved crossing that the train just went through, which I scratch built in about 20 hours with no special tools. Don't let people tell you you can't do something you need to do. Nice to see that it's still working though. Well, now that we've repositioned the Pacific Zip, or the eastbound version thereof, we turn our attention to the work train. And this is actually a weed sprayer train that runs the engine in the back and the weed sprayer in the front normally. But we needed to pull it back into position up in the Burlington yard, and after the operating session it was down in the Delta yard. So we shoved it back into the Bayside yard through the Delta Y and then moved it engine forward out of Bayside, as you see here, across the Snohomish River Bridge and on up into Burlington. Here's the Snohomish River Bridge crossing in the middle of the Delta Y. You can hear Robin tapping the grains of ballast off the side of the rails while he's doing some ballasting over there in the Delta yard. I always love a picture looking through a bridge like this, so this gives us an opportunity. Unfortunately, since we were just repositioning trains, whoever was running this train didn't think of turning the headlight on. Oh well. One could argue fairly effectively that the crew running the weed sprayer train should not be dangling out there in the middle of the air while the train is being repositioned. Sorry about that. Now we're crossing the Skagit River Bridge, approaching Burlington Yard. You can see I have a couple of track cleaning cars mixed in with this maintenance of way train. That backdrop is a photo poster of Mount Baker, and that's really what the horizon looks like in this part of the country, on a nice day anyway. The tank cars in the foreground are all I have room for of representing the Anacortes branch, which served a couple of major refineries in the area. We're about to back the train down onto this spur behind the Anacortes branch, which is where I store this work train. I suppose I could have paid a plumber to relocate all of these water pipes from the upstairs part of the house, but I decided I'd rather spend my money on locomotives, the ones that make noise. Although I've recently learned from some of your comments on the YouTube videos that I'm really ringing the bell excessively here. That nice looking gray crane is an old train's miniature model that I picked up at a swap meet. And I like to put metal wheels on my cars, so I put metal wheels on it and immediately started having shorting problems because the metal underframe would short out with the metal wheels. So after digging out the bottom to make room and clearance for the wheels, I finally got it to work without shorting. But I would have been better off in this one case to just leave the plastic wheels on there. Live and learn. Now we get to hear my favorite ESU shutdown sequence. Very nice. All right, for our next light entertainment, we have a Milwaukee train that needs to be repositioned. So we're backing it through the Delta Y here, and we're going to run it around so that we can back it up the hill. Kind of the way that we pulled the work train up the hill. We're going to be backing this up the hill so we can shove it into its staging track. There's a brace of typical Milwaukee diesels of the era. Very nice. The only reason we don't have good sound here is because this photograph was taken with a GoPro type camera, so the sound is kind of muted. GP30 followed by a GP9 followed by a GP38-2.
I'm going to start spraying with glue and stuff right now.
Okay.
So this might make it more difficult for you to come in here.
I think that's okay. I don't think I have to come around to Y again.
Okay.
Robin and Dave are negotiating trackage rights.
Yeah, we're probably going to be coming down the low line where your hand is.
That's fine.
In a bit.
I'm not that inaccurate, but
okay.
This is going to go over spray on it right here.
Okay, we'll try to stay out of delta then.
Yep.
It's not as chaotic as an operating session, but it's kind of fun to have people both working on the layout and trying to reposition trains all at the same time. A few minutes later, we're backing up the ramp to the Burlington yard and then past that to the Bellingham staging. But unfortunately, this is the last footage I have of this particular train. But stay tuned. Somebody was moving a typical 1973 consist around the layout. All right, now we pick up the camera up in the Skykomish staging yard, where we were kind of straightening things out. And it's hard to describe exactly what we were doing, except that we needed all the trains turned around and repositioned. So it looks like our first move was turning the Pacific Zip on the Rainbow Bridge, which is next to Dave's head there. And you can see the head-end power going out around the curve, and the Pacific Zip right behind. That'll come around the back track, and then we'll reposition it up above Bellingham using a special cutoff we have. But meanwhile, it looks like we have another train to get out of the way, so this is just a bunch of shenanigans, as we call it. Or you could call it watching trains without a lot of plot tension. Maybe you could call it a meditation practice, although I'm not sure how much mindfulness this is creating. The back of the Pacific Zip is going around a teardrop-shaped reverse loop that just drops down from the ceiling, and we painted it like a rainbow, so we call it the Rainbow Bridge. Here's a still shot of what it looks like from the ceiling, and you can see how the train can loop around. And at someone's suggestion, I put hinges on it and painted it to look like a rainbow, so we call it the Rainbow Bridge. And in just a minute, you'll see an action shot of Dave raising it from the lower to the upper position. All right, where were we? We're bringing the Pacific Zip around to reposition it, and as soon as it clears the Rainbow Bridge, Dave is going to flip it up with his hand. Here he goes. And it just rests up there by gravity. That way we don't bang our head on it all the time. I was going to speed this part of the video up, but look at that cool rotating beacon in the shadow of the overhang there. Reminds me of a heartbeat. The F unit there above the yard with the little wire sticking out of it is a train camera that we use to show the dispatcher's office the status of all the trains up in the Skycomish staging yard. It's one of those temporary solutions that has been sitting around here for about 15 years before I have gotten around to installing a better closed-circuit TV camera. That's just the way it works in a real model railroad. Well, you can see we're backing this other train up now that we have clearance on the reverse end of it. And once we've put it in position, we can move the zip forward. You'd never know looking at this, but this entire 5-track staging yard is removable if I ever need to get to the 7-track staging yard that's underneath it and hidden. Fortunately, I've only had to do that once, and we'll just keep our fingers crossed.
So you zip up to Birmingham? Yeah.
Well, now finally we can get our zip put into position. What a great name for a train. It's a zippy zip. Modeling the early 70s is fun for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that the railroads were just trying to figure out what to do about intermodal transport, and so the zip was an experiment of the BN to try to do a faster than passenger train service from Chicago to Seattle. In the early days, it could be short like this, and they also had express boxcars at the end of it, which you can see one of here. Well, having put to bed the zip, we only have one more repositioning move that I got some video of, and this is a backwards move of the last train to be inserted into the Skykomish staging yard in preparation for hopefully the next operating session.
Is he running that train? Yeah, he's back in this track 4.
Of course, each one of these freight cars has an interesting story. The bulkhead flats were coming back empty from the East Coast. The Santa Fe boxcar is a beautiful specimen, but I don't remember what it was used for. And there were both empty and loaded wood chip cars on these eastbound freights. And look at that huge log. I don't think there were too many that big in the 70s, but that particular car was made by J.J. Johnson, who, when he dismantled his layout, I felt I just had to take it over. And then, of course, all these wood chip cars are coming from various lumber mills in the Rockies and the Cascade Mountains, destined for the Everett paper mill of Scott Paper, as well as a large mill that was in Bellingham, Washington. And these two empty gons are coming back into town to be loaded with scrap from making airplanes. Finally, we have a great little consist here for the train with a Alco 636 on the head end of it, which was inherited from the Spokane, Portland, and Seattle Railroad when the BN merged in 1970. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed this random bunch of rail fanning on the HO Burlington Northern, and you'll enjoy all the other videos on my channel, and come back for more when we have a little more interesting plots than just random train movement. So for now, this is Burr Stewart wishing you much fun with trains.